They called me many names, some with shame, some with silence, none with understanding. But heaven never forgot my name. I was Tamar, not the loudest woman, not the safest, but the one who refused to let the promise die. My life was not clean, not simple. It was stained with injustice, pierced by betrayal, and hidden under a veil. But the God of Judah, the God of Abraham, saw me. Not as a scandal, not as a shadow, but as a thread in the covenant he would not allow to be broken. You may know me for the moment I stepped out of silence, covered my face, and risked everything. But before that day, I waited. I waited in rooms of broken vows. I wept behind doors no one opened. I wore the garments of promise and the shame of delay. I was given to men who did not protect. I was promised justice and handed delay. I was tucked away, forgotten like some garment on a shelf. But faith sometimes waits not with folded hands, but with fire in the bones. I was not trying to save myself. I was holding on to something greater. The seed of Judah was meant to live. The lineage of the Messiah was meant to move forward. And when no one else would stand for it, God stirred courage in me. Not perfect courage, not easy choices, but a holy insistence that righteousness is not always soft. I stood on a road, covered in cloth, not to tempt, but to testify. The promise would not die in silence. This is not a story of seduction. It is a story of redemption. God does not shy away from mess. He enters it, redeems it, and from it he births kings, even Christ. I am Tamar. And this is the story of how God uses even the broken and bold to keep his covenant alive. When I was given. I was young when they chose me, chosen not for who I was, but for what I could give. An heir, a son, a future. They gave me to Judah's eldest. I wore the bridal veil, but not the joy. There was no celebration, only expectation, and yet I honored it, because honor was all I knew. But was not righteous. I saw it in his eyes, in the way he regarded the covenant of his fathers like dust on an old scroll. He bore the name of Judah, but not the heart of Abraham, not the fear of the Lord, not the love of what is holy. And then he was gone. The Lord struck him, just like that. No warning, no weeping, just judgment. And I was left, not as a widow with a voice, but as a vessel to be passed along, to Onan, his brother. He came not with love, but with duty, a duty he did not honor. He used me, then denied the seed. He wanted the benefits of the name, but not the burden of legacy. And so he too was struck down. 2 husbands, no child, and still no justice. They said I was cursed. They looked at me as if death followed in my footsteps. But they didn't see. It was sin that reaped what it sowed. I was still waiting. Judah promised me his youngest, Shelah, when he was older. He told me to return to my father's house, to wear widow's garments, to wait in silence. But in his heart, he feared me more than he feared his own God. And I waited, not days, not months, years, long enough to see that Shelah had grown, long enough to know Judah had no intention to fulfill his word, long enough to understand. If no one remembered the promise, I would. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about desperation. It was about faith, a fire that refused to go out even in the dark. The line of Judah was meant to continue. And I, a forgotten widow, a veiled woman, was somehow part of the plan. The road to Timnath. There is a kind of silence that is no longer stillness. It chokes. It presses in on you like walls that won't break. That was the silence I lived in. Judah had lied, not with words, but with delay. Years passed, Shelah was grown, and I was still wrapped in widow's garments, as though hope had died with the sons he gave me. But hope had not died, it burned quietly. The promise was not just a tradition, it was a thread, a holy thread, tied to the seed of Abraham, to the line of Judah, to something bigger than any of us. And I knew. If I did nothing, God's promise might seem buried in the ashes of Judah's fear. So I rose, removed the garments of mourning, covered my face, not to seduce, but to be seen, not as a forgotten widow, but as a woman standing in the path of covenant. I waited by the road to Timnath, where Judah was going, where he did not expect to find a mirror of his failure. He saw a woman veiled, not his daughter-in-law, not a name or a memory, just an opportunity. And he came to me. He gave what he would not give when I asked in truth. His staff, his seal, his cord. Pledges of his identity, symbols of his authority, given to the one he had abandoned. We did not speak of God, but he was there, not in approval of sin, but in providence, redeeming what men tried to bury. Judah left, and I removed the veil. I returned to silence, to waiting. But this time, it was not despair that kept me still. It was the quiet strength of one who had stepped into the mystery of God's unfolding story. I was with child, and the covenant would continue. More righteous than I. The news spread quickly. Whispers became outcries. Fingers pointed. She is with child. Tamar has disgraced Judah's house. Bring her out. Let her be burned. They summoned me not to question, but to condemn. No one asked why I waited so long. No one asked what promises were broken. But I did not speak in anger. I brought only what he had given me. His seal, his cord, his staff. By these, I said, I am with child. A stillness fell over the men, and Judah. Judah looked at what was in my hands and saw himself, not just the objects, but his sin, his delay, his dishonor. And then came words I never thought I'd hear from his lips. She is more righteous than I. Not more clever, not more daring, but more righteous. because I had stood for the promise when he had forgotten it. And in that moment, the shame was not mine. The fire they called for turned inward into repentance. He did not touch me again, not in fear, but in reverence. Something holy had passed between us. And in time I gave birth to twins, to Perez and Zerah, 2 sons, not just of my womb, but of divine remembrance. Through Perez a line would stretch forward, to kings, to hope, to the very Messiah. They may have called me unclean. They may have buried me in rumor, but heaven recorded my name among the mothers of the Christ. A name remembered. I lived many years after the birth of my sons, not in palaces, but in peace. Judah honored me, though we never spoke again of what passed on the road. What passed between us needed no retelling, only the weight of remembrance. I raised Perez with trembling hope, not knowing all God would do through him, but knowing enough to trust. I heard the stories later of Boaz and Ruth, of Jesse and David, and I wept, not with grief, but with wonder. The line of the Messiah ran through my son, through me, a widow, once veiled in shame, once accused, once cast aside. God had not just restored me, He had woven me into salvation, not because I was flawless, but because I was willing to wait, willing to act, willing to risk everything for the sake of a promise. Too holy to be forgotten. If you feel unseen, misjudged, buried in someone else's sin or silence, know this: the God of Judah does not forget faithfulness in the shadows. He does not despise those who ache for righteousness. He remembers. And sometimes the legacy of heaven is born from the womb of injustice, redeemed by one act of holy courage. I am Tamar, and this was not a story of shame, but of redemption. Let your story be the same. Trust Him, even when all else is silent. His promise does not die. It only waits for someone to carry it forward.